Hello, Babayeros. Babayeros sees. And Babayeros, unless that's a word in another language, that's a swear. That is donated to all the languages. And this is relative, we are in a semi-ancient tribe. In our faces, our founders are lied about. In America, our founders, not just as James Madison, not just as Native Americans, not just as Romulus, but as that nature of unity, uh, individually grouped in together, appreciated by that republic that was revealed and defended by Romulus, relative to where and to how nature teaches about criminal insidiousness, positive and negative, how nature could show us if a truth could be used for a lie by that person or by someone else. See, the value of what came first is left out as collusions. A whole bunch of different countries are shared here and there, tactical terror from how the suits and ties, counters, and exceptions could afford defended where they had these subjects. Originally and still, since semi-ancient times, before modern religion's messengers, the sciences became, therefore, the names of people, A through Z, of the human volume science, they became used as by systems tactical ulterior from nature's employments of difference /S. Only the extent of it is debatable. But the nature of debate, black pupils, it has remained criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influenced. But this breaching method knew, this breaching method did this to countries. It measured and maintained, it hurt, tricked, forced, persuaded, measured and maintained human names as the phenomenon of names we can't control, being groupings. The ancients understand there's observed as we can now. This live stream is also the theory of relativity / hyperrelativity. And it is also the identity of relativity / the identity of hyperrelativity / relativity. Theorem. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. Fish, a totally distinct species body of volumes, a volume / S, as individuals of a species body. Fish, they have the same quality aspects nature. Birds, they have the same quality aspects nature. Grouped difference / S is inseparable from how nature communicates, nature's identity. Regardless if we agree about the name, it is a scientific value. Where people are speaking about faith is right where the nature of debate is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, self-valued by the identities of experts of every science. See, the beginning of the Old Testament says to take the pencil and keep, in other words, syntactically, therefore functionally, stay focused on the right part, the part at the beginning of the Old Testament. It is similar with the beginning of the Quran. There are proofs that, it is their nature shows how there was a breaching method that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded, and had sustained uses of it, counters to itself. that people blamed other things other themselves and then defended that as a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, because the problems came through themselves more and more, because now they're fighting it with the courts are being used, those cases are being used to screen itself. This is manifest interstates everywhere the species body is. As part of the reason the Republic came with James Madison's plan, where the states are manifest. It is also where and how manifest was and is. Slavery entrenched, for example, with the syntax of the law, therefore functions. Tactical ulterior from how I've been teaching that in our schools. See, this preaching method employed people to use their knowledge of good and evil and or the nature of debate to hide what came first. And this is also relative to where and to how anyone could get away with having the audacity so overtly / insidiously being against our country's founders, all sides. Italy and America share founders as Romulus. And this is science, though. This is the preservation of science. The modern religions had to do damage control because all locations, areas, and states were defending natures of practical reason, to use Manuel Kant's phrase, that contained quality aspects of fact-driven nature, names, identities, value / value progression, use / s, since before computers, database relativity to ourselves, then further as collusions with a singular use of all location, everywhere the species body is. And so too, this is like a heads up, because I don't know. In other words, I don't you guys pretend I didn't tell anyone. This is Romulus and Remus science. There's a hyper programming that there's a means to appreciate less in ways that the identities of the sciences individually grouped and together can't afford to have discerned, relative to where and to how it uses remotely subjects, treatments, roles, where and how they contain scripts. And they also contain simultaneously apparent motivations. But this is why it is so easy for ourselves. See, before America was founded, and through our founding, before Russia was founding, and through their founding, China's, they were already shared, tactical ulterior from how nature keeps us shared and independent simultaneously. We can discern its identity. It is functional how there is one identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible. And where it is its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that too great, too finite, and active relativity to all things individually grouped in together, that we cannot discern properly the way it wants us to since semi-ancient times. There are 5 distinct identities of time that connect, where there is this identity of hyper-simultaneous nature per science in the process of observation of where and how those species bodies have quality aspects in nature like our own as difference. And while our own species body has differences, we have the same color eyes, black pupils, and we have different color eyes at the same time. And there are exceptions. And where exception nature is / exception nature is simultaneously valued there. No, in the other sequence, conversely / hyper conversely. Because one trinity is inseparable from all things, distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously. slash simultaneously, what it sounds like from inside of itself. Now, where this appears to be debatable, James Madison communicated for us distinctly from, as our founder, distinctly from the presidents, and then himself as the president, no, but that he still didn't have free speech at that time. That's one of the things he communicated for us to have understood where and how to. We were supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, which would have brought up the torture methods against him and every single person sickly distinctly. All natural differences being and having been communicated about through our schools, how this is motivated too simultaneously, and the difference of that, because the motivations were employed. Forgiveness is because of how, what no one wanted collusions with. It was forced, and that was forced sustained. And this preaching method was measuring and maintaining. There are proofs with writing down with database ulterior from modern countries A through Z. And from all voiced groupings. They make groupings as voiced. They speak for humanity. They're leaving that can't afford to discern with the Constitution unabridged. And the fact that we have an amendment that says we have rights that are too numerous to list. And nature shows us the value of sequence truth and the relativity of the denials of it. So how this is motivated, countries A through Z, collusions against themselves. Well, in other words, how it appears to be motivated by money, for example. All those exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing. All descriptions of emotions of their own or other people's. You're leaving out how emotions, see, emotions are so we could come relative to its method of communications, therefore rolls with our speech. Is someone's descriptions of their own emotions or others to leave out what came first, or to leave out smallest finite detail, the relativity of it, and or to leave out simultaneous details, like the value of seasons, how there are things repeated to us by nature that are constant and that are variable, and where and how nature uses the difference between conscious and variable black pupils, tactical ulterior, from how the preaching method does, and where and how it still has collusions through all formal conviction natures, therefore theory, speculation natures. Unsafe are the people of Russia and of America, because the suburbs were designed before our founders were born. They cannot afford to have why and how discerned properly. Mao Zedong, how could he have free speech? That's why we're not supposed to put words in his mouth. But nature itself shows us that already it had been sustained since semi-ancient times. Before modern religions, messengers were even born. And after that, too, the difference of that, they have the people that are in preservation of the Old Testament and preservation of the Quran as collusions with the people that are countering them. And they're not realizing, because of all the relativity, because we don't have hyper relativity appreciated. One of the right in the beginning of the Quran, it says the only thing that people have to be honest about and defend is if they are they going to refer to the identity of the hyper simultaneous as Allah or not. And it says to love the people who are not gonna. And it gives the people who are, it qualifies the people who as long as they're being honest about that, they're directed not to pray in the mosque for the slightest reason. See, modern intelligence there's only three branches of government. And before they were even born, before our founders were born, how those three branches of government were manifest. Even if there's no government. There's the needs for these functions. There is the need for judgment, for descriptions of reason, of logic. This preaching method assigned, guised under differences, black pupils. See, Central Connecticut State University has roles with all these different countries, and they have their shared roles on and off campuses with natures of industries and with natures of like where they use criminal justice. They have prisons. They have a state Connecticut judicial branch offices and corrections offices. Has roles with names on all sides of Central Connecticut State University and on and off it, where it puts the collusions to keep motivations pretended for other causes. Where and how there is that quality of fact treatment nature that is criminal insidiousness / hypercriminal insidiousness, black pupils. In other words, the reason there are environmental damages and problems is because there are nature problems. In other words, the breaching method forced, more so than our founders, all employments as natures of collusions with itself, with sense and sensibilities, for example, hyper additionally from and simultaneously with, and as the value of those known in positions at all locations /s that were either that the different. It was also employed the difference between the formal collusions at formal law and all the sciences voices, or overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Nature can be used to show that a breaching method. So with a little graphic guy and friends, for example, the whole countries A through Z of the cartoon value nature system, they're extorted the same way we know we are now, tortured. In other words, people know and agree that these are not human beings. The suburbs were designed before our founders were born. This breaching method employed people to measure at a location /s use is known as collusion /s. This breaching method affected a means to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures to happen that it knew would happen. And it measures and maintains. Also roles where it controls the records, fabrications. This is where and how, but they had adults and little kids already has collusions. And the difference of that, as overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness to the logic of A through Z, like with blaming things politics, for example, styles. Motivations when they use other people's names, whether they said good or bad. All positive treatments, all negative treatments are collusions with criminal insidious as collusions with criminal insidious natures of positives used for pretended to be science. Where and how there is expert lean. This is also relative to where and to how. The location /s and then further all the other locations. And then further we are a trinity where we are additional name as the grounds voicing /s and or as our own. And per the Constitution unabridged being hyper additional nature. Because the republic for which we stand, before it became and stayed criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influenced. This breaching method maintained collusions Also hypercriminally foreign influence slash criminally foreign influence, sustained first, where it was forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading the names of groups at locations, areas, and states, and then more of individuals to blame other things, others, or selves for a hyper criminal foreign influences and or hyper criminal insidiousness nature. That became relative where and how nature shows us that it was employed. That encounters are employed, and then that's sustained to keep self-value to bridge uses of the sciences and of motivation, narratives and scripts, and their natures and defenses of them with the fact human nature, qual aspect nature, with names use is relativity here. This also did this to countries grouped, knowing they would make voicings. Humanity is a scientific value that is increasingly relative because the relativity of how this human species volume comes with this hyper simultaneous that shows us each species body, even the fish. They come individually grouped, different slash S, and species volume, a species body of individual bodies. The body of Christ comes with decipher, but this is not being allowed to be appreciated because the people that counter the religions and the people in defenses of the religions are still collusions with and as the hyper criminally foreign influence slash criminal and use of difference black pupils. Nature communicates. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes, same time. Nature shows us there is one identity of volume that is inseparable from all others, and where and how it, while as them, while not, and while anyway, as a hyperactive identity of relativity that we could appreciate properly, as the Constitution properly demonstrates. But this requires a quality of fact, human nature. The interbranch lie about their motivations. Where they, for example, I believe his name is Larry Johnson, is one of the sources of a Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel. And he notes that it takes a long time to train people. At the end of, in other words, kids and adults have been involved with an identity theft, fraud, slander method, and or fake motivations planting. Because increasingly there are foreign bodies, branch as ones that were used. This is forgiveness is relative to these people have roles with all these different countries and where and how exploited by a breaching method. It maintains and collusions with the actual motivations for people to pretend things are debatable that are not. Like where they, for example, Connecticut Interbranch has been switching names and forging names. And they have roles with criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and of precedents and or of exceptions in exception nature. This is also where and how this breaching method is signed, the lead up to any nature of business, to where and how they're going to sense and discern self-value roles with logic and or as nature, with predicate acts with facts. Otherwise, that's going to be discerned because at each age of fact should be nature. Nature gave us means to correlate and to communicate. Other was and is what nature shows us about American history, about European history, about ancient history. They did not have free speech, and they had delusions. The reason we haven't come to this yet is because of roles within identity theft, fraud, slander method that causes negative and caused negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures. And then it showed them how they had collusions with it, where and how the relativity of how we are hyper additionally named, not just as ours, as and for ourselves, but for nature, for ground location slash S, and the relativity of questions. See, nature teaches us by showing us why and how we're all contemplating its ways. It's also answering our questions by showing we've also been asking questions for systems that are bridged as collusions. And that's simultaneously communications other than what is said. That's why increasingly motivated are interbranch to pretend other things, others or selves, was said even at their interbranch locations. They're fabricating transcripts, planting evidences, roles with uses remotely of all natures of investigators originally and still. Tactically, delusions raw too. Psychiatry has roles with countries that have wars with each other, where they have been roles with stealing countless millions. Right from that, like Harper Hospital has an institute of living, not the actual hospital. Two, how they have them as shared identity at the location. That's used to measure and maintain the roles with the breaching method, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. Before our founders were born, the Harper Hospital in the area, and when slavery was still in North and South, and the Institute of Living was founded on the campus of Harvard Hospital in 1822, slavery was still North and South because the breaching method was still entrenched. And the breaching method came from semi-ancient times, black pupils. And it enslaved black and white people and made the difference of that used to measure and maintain other things, others ourselves, blaming for things it caused and sustained. And it maintains this still. So you have subjects treatments at the campuses across the world, across the states, intercities, whose self-value roles with the sciences and the Constitution having been abridged and pretending other anyway. Because a certain type of victim slash hyper victim is the only thing allowed to make convictions, formally or other, at all locations slash S. Otherwise, that body is sensed. To discern this, we have to discern how its use of corners slash S was, is, where, and how it makes confessions. Uses of interbranch, in other words, they make it look like they have parties. They have parties and they'll have a picture. So someone says, I have nothing to do. You know, when people, then you have nothing to do with them. They're doing that to make a fake exception. Because these are people involved with this method that keeps formal cases. The same people have roles of wire crime acts and methods as people on all sides of criminal and civil cases. The difference of that, their lawyers and the interbranch names, and or the names on off the state corrections office and judicial branch offices. The prisons' locations are increasingly roles with their criminals with like a body dumping spot, with the names associated with the body dumping spot next to it of a serial killer, even if they made that up. The prison associated with that guy in Sandy Hook, Newtown. These are increasingly people with the military, criminally foreign influence on off the state capitol, planting evidences with their roles on off WFSB, on off Fox Connecticut News, with people on off Hartford Hospital, planting evidences with them. WTNH with digital crimes with a principal child offender. People that were pretending to they use misdemeanor charge like harassment. Their whiting forensics and Connecticut courts have been planting evidences with them at crime scenes and putting fake things in databases, saying things off the records that pretending that others was on record. So they have more people involved with the South Dean Middle School and with the school, and with next to the schools in town who have been planting evidences with whiting forensics with foreign and domestic military and intelligence judges, prosecutors, their family members involved with wire crimes with Wethersfield Police and their sources. The same names involved with all different police departments, overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones. There are not legitimate with Afghans, with Koreans through decades, through lifetimes. In other words, they are not legitimately with Italy, America. So there, in other words, there are people with the name Demoro that have roles with psychiatry in Italy, and they have roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And there's a Mr. Prusi. I never had a conversation with him. Tried to make verbally, made this fake exception. I made one comment. Positive. I hope you get in there. When he wanted to do, he was this when I was in fifth grade. He was McCullough, Christine McCullough. God bless. Sorry, she died in a going to NASA. He had been one of the teachers who wanted to go in that. Now, before and after that classroom, there were people increasingly involved with body dumping spots. Other too, Billy Bugrasso's body dumping spot. Increasingly, Sal Saviello has people tied. I don't know Sal Saviello. He was in my fourth grade class. I never had a verbal conversation with my life. He made his, one time they tried to make a fake exception, saying I didn't respond after he graduated. It has something to do with Two Rod Highway names, on off Two Rod Highway, Hang Dog Lane, their conjunctions. They increasingly have roles with mayors too, and other natures of politicians who have roles. Sometimes it's them, the one influencing people, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and to confess, demonstrate, record, confirm things. And sometimes it's their sources. And the difference of that is also used black pupils. These are people from Wethersfield with KKK, black families, intelligence families, who also have roles with uses of the spots next to the schools in Hartford and their roles on off the state corrections offices, criminally foreign influence, and the spots next to it. The news media, and these are people also leading with the World Trade Center attack. Years ago, they'd used for federal evidence as crimes, collusions, hyper additionally, putting fake things in databases about school protests regarding for example the a protest, and it was in 1994, 1993, 94 school year, and I had stayed back. The only reason I was going in that thing, and the reason I stayed back, is also planted as federal evidence as crimes. My teacher, I don't remember her name. I never had a personal conversation with her. She has roles with a bunch of people from Washington, D.C., involved with the putting fake things and lies about my role with the protest again. And I did call the news up, but I didn't tell that girl. I don't know if this girl is increasingly, she's one's involved, one of the ones who is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by others, and she demonstrated this preemptively. I don't know. She had roles of untimely deaths, even if they were made up at Trinity College. And the people involved with that had roles with uses of it on my street as people from other areas, increasingly who've been planting evidences on my street, who also that was exploited at other places I lived. Because there are methods manifest where a breaching method uses the formal identities of fact, truth, nature, qua aspects, nature to fabricate evidences on a mass scale, black pupils. So that this is also relative to where and to how anyone could pretend it's politics. That's the use of all truths. That's truths used for lies. See, rather than dealing with their actual premises. So if they want to attack a leader, don't attack for in other words, attack the actual premises. They want to attack leader so they can just keep the subject all collusion, the difference of who's guilty, to hide the fourth hyper point. So it has something to do with their roles with the kids of and the adults of the kids tied to their kids of the leaders of kids, sickly distinctly for and the opposite. If this family has this exploits difference, exploits weakness and strengths, the difference of why and how, because it's planting fake motivations. It already did this. It built suits and ties and counters, showed them things like wars. How? But they get up in there and they find out our countries have been hurting, killing, and torturing each other. But we knew this. But if we followed from the beginning, a breaching method is effectively doing this, even from before modern religions. So we can discern there are functions by where, for example, Central Connecticut State University has roles with a whole bunch of people with Hartford courts and the Britain Superior Court and Connecticut's District Court who have roles with planting evidences and fake motivations with a whole bunch of different countries. So for example, Russians and Americans have Russian and American intelligence agencies, plural. They have crime methods. They have predicate acts with facts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences, crimes, collusions, with remote uses of all sides of criminal and civil cases, where they keep all nature, like people are going to have parties and things like that, and people are going to go back and then speak about each other and what they think about each other, where and how they are maintained, where it is used criminally foreign influence, the truth to lie, for example, where people say, outside of court cases too, well, this is the way justice comes. First, you have to sue for it. See, these are people that are measuring and are used to shown that they're already being and haven't been used remotely. Criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence. That's 3 ways. So religions are about the identity the sciences share. And they're about the value of a sequence, truth as itself, and as its identity of relativity questions. To connect and forge names, aware into how they were abused since they were kids, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, also attached to fake changed communications and natures of communication with others, directed to lie about that on a mass scale. We have criminally foreign influence definitions pretended influence to pretend about the value of the appearances of justice so they could keep really how and why no one could afford to discern properly why Marbury versus Madison should be summarized as I believe it is. But then, in other words, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. But she goes further. Our founders would agree that we are to get to the point, and we already have with him when they bring up shock and awe, groupthink, radical extremism, shock and awe. These are words and phrases where and how our sides had collusions with the World Trade Center attack through their roles with uses of World Trade, through their uses of natures of whether through their roles or uses of industries A through Z. Used to measure and maintain. The only people allowed to speak are people who are going to be as natures or acquiescent to natures of styles of life. I have to cut my hair. Do a haircut. Boxing. I have to get my professional boxing license. So I was in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center. The intelligence community of Central Connecticut State University is increasingly making confessions tied to that. These are people that keep the family members of and the friends and the neighbors up. The intelligence of reporters, also criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, names next to their locations, involved with predicate acts with facts, methods with them. And now these are people speaking about crimes every day. These are people disemployed, people to speak about crimes. So it could function, measure, and maintain. Predicate acts with facts, nature's needs, roles, styles. Collusion /S. So I tell best boxing, thank you. I just think we'll come back to this.